Perl tutorial part 92, setting scope with my and local. The my keyword will localize a variable to just the local block of code, and my can work with scalars, arrays and hashes. So let's create a little subroutine called print it, and say name equals Fred, print's name, and then we can call our subroutine. Let's run this, and we get Fred. Well, that's not a surprise really. Now let's print our name again here, and we'll get 2 Freds. Okay, so we can use the my keyword. Now this will limit the variable name, which is equal to Fred, to just this block of code. So if we try to print the name from outside the block of code, it will not work. So let's run this, and here we just get Fred the first time from inside the subroutine, but because the variable name equal to Fred is local to just the subroutine, it is not accessible from outside the subroutine's block of code. Okay, so let's copy this block of code down. Now let's take the name out of here. Let's change the name of the subroutine to print it to, and let's put the name in here. Now let's also change this to name to, like so, and let's change the name to Barney. Again, let's run this. Okay, and we get Barney twice. But if the variable name2 equal to Barney is local to just outside the subroutine, it will be able to print it here, but when we call the subroutine, it will not be able to access the variable. So we just get Barney once. Okay, so that's my, where we create a variable that is local to a particular block of code. So now let's move on to local. Now local makes a copy of an already existing variable. Create a subroutine, print it 3, okay, now let's create a number equal to 100. Let's call our subroutine, say inside the subroutine local, let's create a variable called local value equals our number, and let's print the local value. And now let's try also to print the local value from outside the subroutine. Let's run this. So we get the number 100. Number is 100. Run the subroutine, so local value makes a copy of the number 100 and we print out the number 100. If we try to print the local value from outside the block of code, it can't be done. Okay, so my and local essentially do the same thing, but there is a difference. So let's create an example. Number equals 1. Create a subroutine called num that will print out the number. Let's create another subroutine called LOC2, local 2. Now let's create a local change to our number. Let's call the other subroutine from inside the subroutine. Now let's call our subroutine lock2 and call our subroutine num. Okay, so number equals 1. So first of all, lock2 gets called, so that's saying that locally the number equals 2. Run the num subroutine, which prints out the number, so that's going to print out the number 2. And then the subroutine called num is called, and the number is 1 to the sub num, and will therefore print the number 1. So we should get the numbers 2 and then 1. Okay, so now let's copy the subroutine lock2 and the 2 calls down. Now let's rename this to lock3. Okay, so now this time let's change this word local to my. The call to lock3 will be made. It says my number equals 2, but this variable number is only local to the subroutine, and then it calls for the subroutine called num. So the subroutine num knows that the number is actually 1, so that will print out 1, and then we call the num subroutine, which again only knows the number to be 1, so this will print out 1 and 1. So let's run this, and we get 1 and 1. So that's the main difference between my and local, and that is because local is runtime, not compile time. So any changes you make with local to a global variable will still remain when you leave the local scope by using a subroutine call.